Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Molitzis. I'm here with Carrie Eleveld, and today we are going to be talking about the challenges Democrats are facing, selling the fact that Joe Biden is, gasp, a good president. Just fundamentally on the issues, on results, on the economy, on almost every single measure. And of course, the world's a complicated place, not on everything, but as far as presidents are concerned, he's had a fabulously successful presidency. And yet, what is sort of considered what some people are calling a vibe session. So it's not really about the actual economic indicators or the jobs numbers or people's earning power. It's about this feeling, this malaise for whatever reason. And that is why people are sort of struggling to embrace the good times. And that has consequences for the 2024 presidential and down ballot elections. And Carrie, we have a guest. So to help us talk about this today and maybe make some sense about what is actually going on, our guest today is Simon Rosenberg. I've known Simon forever. He's been on the show multiple times. He's got 30 years of political consulting and media experience. He is now the person behind Hopium Chronicles on Substack. And we've talked about this before, but for those who don't know, Simon was one of the few people like me and like Carrie and I think Joe Trippi that were saying in 2022 that the Democrats were in for a good year, that all the pessimism about a red wave were overblown. And people would accuse Simon, who was very active on Twitter, of being full of hopium, as in he was making stuff up, right? Hopium.
Smoking hopium.
So Democrats won, and Simon has embraced it. So Simon, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to see you both, Marcos and Carrie. I'm really great to be back with both of you.
It turns out that Simon had the good shit. You know what I'm saying?
I think I got it from Joe Biden.
Oh man,
it's a part of the Biden Bidenomics, right? Is to spread hopium all across the country.
So Simon, that's really what we want to talk about today. Is this notion that, as you've been chronicling, and some people have been mentioning, things are pretty good right now, and Joe Biden has actually been a good president. Yet he doesn't seem to be getting credit for that. And there's a talk about his low approval ratings, and there's sort of this vibe session, right? This malaise that has infected people, despite things being actually objectively, by the data, pretty good. Do you have any sense of what's going on?
Yeah, we could talk about this for days, and I'm not sure that anybody really exactly knows, but let me offer some thoughts. So first of all, in many of the measures in people's lives, when you ask questions about things like, are you happy in your work? Are you happy with your income? Are you happy with your life? Those ratings are actually very high, historically high right now. And so, and we also know on the question of, how do you feel about the economy? When you break it out by party, Biden has, with Democrats, he's got very, very high job approval rating, just like he does on foreign policy too. I mean, he's up in the 70s and 80s on the economy. And as Paul Krugman in the New York Times has been writing about recently, I think very eloquently and powerfully, is that, the people that are down on the economy are MAGA. And that, essentially the way this works in any kind of question in national politics now, Joe Biden gets a really good rating from Democrats, medium rating from independents, and then he gets like a 0 from MAGA, right? So it pulls all the numbers down because at least, Democrats would give Trump like a 20, in the way the math worked. And so I'm not as worried about this because in 2022, we won and had a terrific election despite low Biden approval and high inflation. The economy is substantially better today and will be in this election than it was in 2022. We had another really good election in 2023. We're off to a really good start in 2024. And it's because the most powerful thing in our politics today isn't disappointment in Joe Biden or the Democrats. It's fear and opposition to MAGA. That's the thing that's it's been driving our politics since 2018. And if you've been worried about MAGA before, Well, wait till you see the MAGA of 2024, because it's a lot more ugly and awful and terrible and dangerous and scary than it was before. And so if, you know,
Yeah, they're smoking the bad shit.
yeah, they're smoking the bad. Yeah, no, I mean, they're presenting what we're looking at as the ugliest political party in American history since the Democratic Party of the 1850s, right? I mean, this is the ugliest bunch of stuff that we've all ever seen. And so I have this quiet confidence that once voters really understand that it's Trump and it's Biden, you know, that Biden will pick up a few points, everyone will get a little bit more calm, you know, and then we just got to put our head down and do the work and go win the election.
Carrie, I know you got a leaf blower going on in the background, but I know you're dying to get a
I'm
question
glad that's
in.
not me. I was just worried that was me somehow. Usually it's my dog barking. I was waiting. So Carrie, thank you. Carrie,
Sorry
thank you.
about that. Yeah, no, I did. I have a dog too, so you might hear her because she's barking at the leaf blower outside. Anyway,
course.
so right, it's really good over here. But I didn't hear anything that you said, Simon. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally joking.
Yeah.
I heard it all. It was all good.
Yeah.
I just wanted to note also that you know, it's not only like you talked about Paul Krugman writing about the economy and how, you know, when you look at the questions about how do you feel about the economy, it's clear that, like, you know, Republicans are down here at 0 and they're pulling everything down and they're non-responsive to any of the changes in the actual, economy. That's the same thing is true for age, right? I mean, it's a partisan bias. So what you'll notice is if you go into the crosstabs of, are you worried about Joe Biden's age? It's true that people are worried about Joe Biden's age. It's also true that Democrats are willing to say, I'm concerned about that. Guess who isn't willing to say that about Trump?
Right.
Republicans, right? So much of this is a partisan bias.
And I just want to quickly before Paul Krugman is using Civics data, which is our data.
Yes, by the way, he's a huge promoter of Civics.
So I just want to take a little moment to brag, pat ourselves on the back. All right, Jerry, go back.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And this is one of the reasons that I love Civics, and I write about Civics all the time, and I use their graphs and charts, but, you know, I'm not Paul Krugman. So there you go. But anyway, I wanted to bring something else up too, is that, you know, to your point that people are feeling pretty good, you know, like Axios has this thing called the Vibes survey. And when they ask people about how they feel about their personal finances and not the economy, they actually feel really good about their personal finances. And I'm going to cue out now since it sounds like
and Carrie, let me just build on what you were saying, is that we also know that consumer sentiment is rising very dramatically. And I caught the very end of what Marcos was saying, and I think what he was saying is correct. Is, listen, we just went through a national trauma as a country, right? I mean, a really profound trauma, and particularly a profound trauma if you were an older person or a parent with kids at home. And I think it's going to take a while for people to feel like we're on firm ground again. I mean, I think that's okay. You know, I think it's part of what's happening, and what, despite all of the questions about Biden's age and the disappointment, you know, the worries about the economy, this basic fundamental reality is that since Dobbs, Democrats keep overperforming in elections, Republicans keep struggling. And we saw that throughout 2022. We had like a blue wave year in 2023. We won everywhere and took all sorts of stuff away from them, including the 6-week abortion ban. And we killed the idea of the 15-week abortion ban in Virginia. And we flipped a bunch of places all over the country. The Wisconsin Supreme Court seat, which, you know, has ended up getting rid of the terrible gerrymander in Wisconsin. We had a really good year in 2023. And then the question is, would it show up in 2024? Now that it started to become the presidential, and we've started to see it show up in the presidential, right? Trump has underperformed public polling now by a substantial margin in the first 3 early states. They had an anemic turnout in Iowa. I tell the story that in Iowa, he got 56,000 votes out of 750,000 registered Republicans. 93% of registered Republicans in Iowa, after $100 million and tons of candidate time and debates, you know, 93% of Republicans in Iowa didn't vote for Trump, right? And he's supposed to be this very powerful figure. The RNC is broke. Trump is spending more money than he's taking in, which has never happened before at this, you know, at a serious presidential campaign
Lawyers
like
are
this.
expensive, Simon.
Yeah, I know. And, we've seen dozens of leading Republican Party officials across the country indicted. We've seen two just removed in his, wild scandals that just happened. House Republicans are leaving the House in droves. They're abandoning ship. They see the dumpster fire and they're running in the other direction. And Trump is losing in court all over the place. I mean, he's getting routed in court. And so when you look at their thing, right, their thing is broken and broken, as I like to say. Trump is dramatically underperforming, and then look at us, right? Biden's raising tons of money. He doesn't have a serious challenge. The party's actually relatively unified. We've all been through times when it wasn't, right? It's relatively unified right now. He's done very well in the early primaries where there's actually been contested voting, but also he's been, what's important for us is that we won this House special election in Orlando, Florida, where we were dramatically outspent in a very competitive race. We just blew it out in New York 3. I'm very close to Tom Suozzi. He just called me a few minutes ago. No one thought we were going to win that race by more than 1 or 2 points, and we won by 8 points. And so this basic dynamic is that I think that we've seen Democratic overperformance, Republican struggle, is because I think at the core, something broke inside the Republican Party with Dobbs, that the party became too ugly, too awful, too extreme, too dangerous for a lot of Republicans. And they're just not playing ball with the MAGA-led party anymore. And they're going to have a very hard time, in my view, in the general election. That's why it's a fundamental reason I'm so optimistic about our opportunities in 2024.
I just want to piggyback real quick and say about abortion and Dobbs, right? This new wrinkle, which is horrifying about, IVF and the IVF ruling in the in vitro fertilization ruling in Alabama from the Supreme Court that ruled that frozen embryos are people, right, is a disaster. And it is, people think of abortion as the thing that you use when you don't want something, when something goes wrong, or when, there was an accident or whatever, right? A mishap. But people using IVF want babies. They want them. They want that option. They are incredibly invested, particularly the women in Alabama who have frozen embryos right now, who have gone through a bunch of treatments in order to get those, the frozen embryos, in order to get the embryo to take all that stuff, right? So the idea that, and I looked at the demographics of who this affects, and it is very white. It is very upper income. And there are some other things too, but like,
Means
it's
suburban?
totally suburban. And not only that, it's not just women. I've got news for all the Republicans out there saying, oh, this is a terrible situation for women. Men want those babies too, you idiots. Right. Yeah. So this isn't just a woman issue anymore. Right. This is a direct correlation of what happened in Dobbs and how it is now turning into a nightmare, not just for American women, but for the American people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, can I just say quickly is that I think one of the things that happened with the IVF stuff is that it's now a confirmation that Dobbs was just the beginning. And if you wondered really what was going to happen and what their intent was, the Supreme Court saying we should just leave it to the states, right? I mean, it's an absurdity. I mean, this is an unprecedented war on women, on reproductive freedom, reproductive health in America. Germany just issued a travel advisory to the United States, telling that pregnant German women should be careful about coming to the United States because they're not guaranteed to get the care they need if they're here, right? I mean, we're moving backwards into the medieval times here in the United States, and I think the IVF stuff is devastating for the Republicans because it made their fantasy that somehow they were going to escape the downward pressure on their brand post Dobbs. It's now inevitable that this is going to be pulling them down. Like the anchor around their ankle just got twice as big as it was before. And it was bad to begin with, right? I mean, this has been central to the reason they keep struggling. And I think one of the things we should talk about and we should do research on is that, and I think this is where Nate Cohn and some of the folks talking about elections are not getting this right. This shift of higher income, higher educated people into the Democratic Party that's happened, and particularly post Dobbs, is not just a voting issue. It's a money issue. It's money that is now not going to Republicans. Trump is struggling to raise hard dollars. Nikki Haley raised more money than he did last month, right? And it's money that's coming to us. And that extra money is building the largest campaigns that we've ever had, which is central to the reason why we're winning these elections. And so I think the consequences of what's happening here is dire for the Republican Party, not just electorally, but organizationally. The Republican Party's hard dollar part of the Republican Party is atrophying, and ours is becoming stronger and bigger than it's ever been in modern history. And it's another reason why, we should have a quiet confidence about what's going to happen in 2024. We have an incredible amount of work to do. But my God, I mean, you can't put lipstick on this Trump and MAGA pig and dress, my line on this, if I could do this, is that, you can dye his hair, paint his face, strap a girdle on him and a diaper too. You can pump him full of speed, and this guy's still never going to look like a presidential candidate ever again. And I think we have to just, the emperor has no clothes. We're going to pull the wizard, the curtain back from the wizard. This guy is the most awful, horrible thing we've all ever seen. And we're all pretending in this ridiculous kind of Foxlandish way that he's a serious candidate for president of the United States. And we just got to stop going there collectively and really claiming that, showing that the emperor has no clothes, that he's, he wears more friggin' makeup than drag queens drag queens do. And we got to just mock this guy because he's a joke. He's an embarrassment. He's an insult to all of us who care about our families and our kids and our country. And it's why we're all here and why we're fighting so hard in this election.
All right. So
Sorry,
as you alluded, Donald Trump has really been underperforming the polls, and it's significant. It's 6 to 8 points, or 6 to 10 points. I think some of the states have been 10 points. So he polls worse in South Carolina, which is one of the most MAGA states possible. He only got 60%. Most of the states, he's barely struggling to get half of the Republican turnout, and those turnouts aren't particularly great. It's not like you're getting record turnout. So, like you're right, most Republicans are not turning out for Donald Trump. And if you look at the fundraising numbers, the fact that he has installed his daughter-in-law to run the RNC with zero experience running anything,
I would say asterisk. He wants to. I think Haley Barber. I think someone actually filed
Haley Barber's son or daughter.
Haley Barber's son. That's what I was wondering.
But there's no vote yet, and we'll see what that looks like. Who the RNC members are? They're going to try to prevent him from using RNC funds to pay his legal bills. RNC's broke regardless, so it's not like the previous.
Can we just say, though, that there's been a petition filed that that Trump, until he wins the nomination, would not be able to take over the RNC? I mean, he actually hasn't. I think it's been announced that he's going to install Laura, but she hasn't been actually installed yet. Is that true, Simon? I think that's true.
Yes. And so the critical thing here, let's just recognize there are two different things going on here, right? One is that he wants to do it for the money. The second thing he wants to do is for the court cases. He wants to argue that he's the nominee in the court cases, and that it's past the point where any of these cases can move against him because he's already the nominee of the party. And that's the other reason he's freaking out so bad about Haley staying in, is that it weakens his position on all these claims of immunity and everything else that he's been trying to do to delay, because he actually isn't the nominee of the Republican Party. We're not actually in the general election yet. And so, he is spinning his wheels because he's getting his ass kicked in court case after court case. And if this continues, look, he has his first criminal trial starting on March 24th in New York over the Stormy Daniels case. And so the fact that he paid a porn star to have sex while his wife was home with their young child,
family values,
is going to be back in the news. And that, people have already gone to jail over this case, right? So, he's got enormous legal exposure. This wasn't one of the high profile cases. This is, a lower profile case, but this stuff is coming, and he just keeps losing because he's guilty, right? He's actually done all these things. And so, he's got a lot of exposure. And so I do think that I think that if you really take a step back and look what's happening, is their thing is in serious trouble. That he's a much weaker candidate than he was in 2020. Remember, for your viewers and listeners, 80% of the money and the staff in a general election go through the state parties and the national party. They don't go through the Trump campaign. So the parties are this huge funnel and vehicle through which the actual operations all happen. if that's all atrophied and burned to the ground and has crazy people running it, right, it has enormous consequence for how they're going to conduct the campaign itself. And that's why the sort of the breaking apart of the RNC right now and the breaking apart of the party infrastructure is so consequential for
Yeah,
Trump.
in key battleground states like Michigan and Arizona as well.
No, it's
Yeah.
crashing. I mean, they
Yeah.
put crazy MAGA people in charge, and the parties are atrophying. People aren't giving them money. They don't have any staff. And there is a limit, to how fast you can grow something, right? There's an organic kind of limit, and they can't like beam in there in July and August when there's nothing there and produce a big national campaign that quickly. And so they've got enormous operational and financial problems that I think are still not adequately understood in the national discourse. As somebody who's been through presidential campaigns and been doing this a long time, their thing is, they got big problems right now.
So I think we've talked about how Trump is underperforming polls and
Yep.
and the organizational problems and the shit show that is the Trump campaign, the Republican Party. Yet the national polls still show pretty much a 50-50 race.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Well, I think so. I think a few things. One is that I think that our side has no reason to be engaged. We haven't really had a competitive primary. And I worry, I will say, I worry about what happens to incumbents in our current system, where so much of the way that we interact with information now is like social media. It's about contact, right? And it's about what's it called, attention economy that we all live in. And it's sort of what I think happened in 2016 with Hillary. I mean, I think her not having a real primary, I think, hurt her in terms of how much she was on television, how much people were seeing her, how big the organization got. Obama in 2008, we had our best national result as a party in 2008 that we've had since 1964 in what was arguably the most competitive primary, right, in 2008, because Democrats were engaged. They had candidates, they were giving money, they were paying attention, and they were in the game, right, really early. And then Obama came out of the chute and brought that whole thing, forward. And Trump in 2020 didn't have a primary and he got beat. And so I think that the lack of engagement of our side and the campaign, frankly, the Biden campaign starting a little bit late, in my view, is the only thing that worries me. And I'm not a worrier. At my site, we talk about how we do more and worry less. I'm not into worrying. I think we worry too much as Democrats. The one thing, if I could change right now, so I wish the campaign had started a little earlier. We can make up that ground, right? They're gonna have to work really hard. And the good news is that many grassroots volunteers haven't been sitting it out. They've been doing work and winning all these elections all across the country, as we just saw in the Swazi race. In the Swazi race, by the way, we made 2 million phone calls 2 million, right? Which is like the kind of number you would make in Michigan in the general election. We made 2 million phone calls in 5 weeks in a House special election. I mean, to show how intense and powerful our grassroots is right now. I think
to be clear, that's volunteers. Yeah. It's not paid
it's
staff.
All volunteers. There's no paid. There's no paid.
Yeah.
The estimate is that the typical Democratic household got 5 postcards written to them in the Swazi district. They knocked on.
So they were like, "God damn it, okay, we're gonna vote."
No. But it's the point is that look, we're building the most powerful democratic machine that we've ever had. The hundreds of thousands, millions of proud patriots who love their country are going to work in election after election, and they're going to go to work in the general election too. It's one of the reasons we keep performing at the upper end of what's possible. It's because of all the people listening and watching today, who've just put their head down and they write their postcards and do their calls and do their texting and canvass when they can and be information warriors for our democracy. All of this is adding up to creating the most powerful political machine we've ever had, while their machine is atrophying and dying and collapsing in front of our eyes.
Right. Right. Hey, I think we would be doing our listeners a disservice if we didn't at least mention what happened in South Carolina. And I'm particularly interested in this personally because, so first of all, Nikki Haley got 43% in New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire was sort of custom built for her. A bunch of super engaged in voters, libertarian streak, highly educated group of people in New Hampshire, right? And so when she got 43% there, I was like, this is great. This gives us some hope. But I never expected her to come close to getting it again And when she did that, I lived in South Carolina for 7 years of my early adult life. I lived in Charleston and I lived in Greenville, so in the Low Country and the Upstate. And I was shocked, and I am talking shocked, when I found out that she got 40% in South Carolina. So she is uncovering not just a weakness, but a wide berth of voters that the Biden campaign can go after. So yeah, just go ahead.
No, this is super important. We didn't cover this earlier, is that we've now seen the polling and the results in these 3 early states matter more than the national polling, because these are voters who've seen ads, seen candidates. They've had to go through the process of, figuring out what they want. If you're living in another state, it's still kind of a luxury, right? You haven't had to go through all of that to get to the place of decision making. So these are highly informed voters, and they're also people who voted, right? Not non-voters, right? So these are highly engaged people. And what we're learning from what we're learning is that Trump keeps underperforming public polls and is struggling to get the vote that he wants. The second thing, though, is that we've seen now in all 3 states in the exit and entrance polls, a substantial number of Haley voters who've said they will vote for Biden in the general election. Not that they won't vote for Trump. There's a difference, right, between not voting for Trump and voting for Biden. In one South Carolina exit poll that Fox News was talking about the other night, 59% of Haley voters said they were open to voting for Biden. We haven't seen poll numbers like that in a presidential election since the Reagan election in 1984. I mean, we haven't seen that potential for crossover that could happen. In Iowa, the number the NBC News, the first indication we had of this is the Sunday before the Iowa caucuses, NBC News released a poll that showed that Haley at 20% and 43% of her voters said that they would vote for Biden in the general. Only 23% said they vote for Trump. Now, we know that a bunch of those people will end up voting for Trump, but let's just talk about what the 43 of the 20% means. That's 5% of the overall electorate or the overall vote in the general election. 5 percentage points, right? 1 out of 20 voters are Republicans who voted for Haley, who said they're going to vote for Biden in the general election.
And that's a 10-point swing.
Yeah, no, that is catastrophic. Even if we get halfway there, right, that's 2 to 3 points on top of what we already had. And remember, Trump lost the last election, everybody, right? So he has to gain, he has to grow, and he's bleeding Republicans. I mean, this is part of what happened to all the Trumpy candidates in the battleground states in 2022, is that they all failed to bring their coalition together. They bled Republicans into the Democratic camp. I mean, when Whitmer announced in 2022 in Michigan, she had 150 prominent Republicans
on the governor, by the way. Yeah,
with her. I mean, we haven't seen things like that in 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, there hasn't been this kind of open crossover. And the thing that's important for everyone to realize is that some of that happened in 2020. Some of it happened. It was, I think, arguably bigger in 2022. If it happens now even bigger in 2024, you're now going to have Republicans who voted Democratic in 3 consecutive elections. Those are called Democrats. They're not called Republicans anymore, right? And so there is sort of the reverse of the Reagan Democrat thing here potentially happening.
The Dixiecrats, right?
Chunk of
the chunk of Republican 30 years.
Right. And so we're seeing, I think that the Republican Party has splintered. I think Dobbs increased the splinter, right, that had already begun. The attack on the Capitol, the growing extremism and danger of the Republican Party, the sort of inescapable awfulness of Trump, and that all of this is creating, to your point, Carrie, a huge opening for the Biden campaign to go take away stuff from Republicans that was never available to us before. And it's why I wrote a memo a year ago, which we've talked about on this together, called Get to 55.
I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, which was a year ago. I made this argument that their increased extremism and everything else was creating opportunity to grow our coalition and take stuff away from them. And look what we did in 2023 since I wrote that memo. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're going back too quickly. I just want to really stress that.
Yeah.
So foundationally, right now we're a 51-49, 52-48 nation, slight Democrat, which means that in a bad year, Republicans win. We have to get everybody out, and we have the lowest performing voting groups of all of them. So it's a struggle every election. Simon's been arguing, all we got to do is get 3 to 4 points. And we can get 3 to 4 points. He's looked at young voters, at Latina voters, at single women. He's looked at various groups, and the numbers are there. And now we have Haley voters. If we can just go from 51 or 52% of the electorate to 55, that is a 55-45 nation. That's a 10-point spread. That gives us some breathing room in case you have a bad turnout election. Also means we're going to win a lot more House and Senate races down the ballot, and governor races, et cetera. So that's an incredibly important, I think, shockingly revolutionary idea. Let's expand.
Well, I mean, look, this answers all of our questions. What about third party? If we win by 10 points, it doesn't matter, right? What about all the shenanigans Republicans might pull at the election? If we win by 10 points, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, the way we have to think about this, and Marcos, we discussed this, I think, in one of our previous shows, is that so just a couple quick stats, right? So Republicans won 5 out of 6 presidential elections from 68 to 88, some of them by enormous margins. And the only election we won in that period was Jimmy Carter's election, which he got to 50.1% after Watergate, right? I mean, pretty incredible. I mean, pretty show the sign of how weak we were as a national party. And then Clinton won in 92. And since 92, we've won more votes in 7 out of 8 elections. It's the best popular vote run of a political party in American history. But there's 2 different periods in there. 92 to 2004, we averaged 47% of the vote in those 4 elections. And then when I got to know you, Marcos, in those years originally, right? Because of millennials and Hispanics and the work that I did back then about showing that there was a new coalition coming, Obama leaned into that coalition. He got all the way up to 53%, the best showing we'd had since 1964, the second best showing we had since FDR's presidency, by the way. It's that significant, that victory. And in the 4 elections since 2004, we've averaged 51, they've averaged 46. So we've had a 5-point delta right over the Republicans. So we went from 47 to 51 by identifying a new coalition and building a politics towards it. And what I'm arguing is we need to do the same thing now with it. We have another opportunity to expand our coalition to go from 51 to 55 by identifying and targeting these groups and recognizing that Republicans are, because of their extremism and everything else, have made stuff available to us that would not be available to us before, right? It's not just our strength and our vision, it's their weakness. We have this opportunity to take stuff away from them. And in 2023, I wrote this memo in March a year ago, and then we took away Wisconsin Supreme Court seat. We took away Colorado Springs and Jacksonville, Florida, 2 of the largest Republican held cities in the country. We took away the 6-week abortion ban. We took away, in Ohio, we took away the Virginia House and sort of dashed their hopes of the 15-week abortion ban and Glenn Youngkin coming in on a white knight and saving the Republican Party. We then gained seats in New Jersey. Andy Beshear grew his margin in Kentucky. We won municipal races and city council races and school board races all across the country. We then won in Orlando. We just won in New York 3. Every one of these things is stuff we're taking away from them. We're expanding, we're growing, they're getting weaker and shrinking, right? I think that is the likely scenario about what happens this fall. It's not a guarantee. I'm not predicting.
We got to work. I mean,
we got to do the work
because 2 million phone calls were made in the New York special, right?
It's incredible. So I mean, that took a 1 to 2 point race. Right. It took a 1 to 2 point race and made it an 8-point race. And my favorite part of that day, can I just tell everybody the story, is that the campaign emailed me, Swazi, at 6:30 and said, we have leftover GOTV targets because the election day vote was a little low because of the snow. They had bad weather that day. They said, will you email your community and ask them to make calls? Because they still had 2.5 hours, right? The vote, the polls were open to 9 o'clock. So I emailed and 300 people clicked through and started making calls on a Tuesday night, right? Yeah. But then I got a message from someone in my community and said, Simons, thanks so much. I want you to know I'm sitting in Los Angeles in a backyard. There's 12 other people here with me. We've been making phone calls into New York 3 all day, and we're not going to stop until the polls close. And, we have to recognize that we didn't have the technology to do that kind of stuff 8 years ago, 6 years ago. And what's happening now is that, in California, you could always export your money to other states. Now you can export your labor. And, and it's making an enormous difference. We are building the largest and most powerful democratic machine we've ever had. And it's because of all of you.
I don't want to rain on your parade. Simon,
but go ahead, Carrie.
but I don't want to rain on it,
Yeah.
but you do know, of course, that the Republicans were hiring snowplows in order to get out. Well, you may have had an army of callers, Simon, but the Republicans had at least 3 or 4 snowplows that were trying to clear the streets so that their voters could get
Only
out.
in their neighborhoods, by the way. That, I mean, it's, if you want to know like everything about our two parties, right? Like, they hire snowplows just to dig out their neighborhoods, not to help the whole place, right? To help everybody, because we're the party of everyday people. They're the party of oligarchs, right? And it manifests in every possible way, including hiring private snowplows. By the way, when in a major storm, which meant that those snowplows were not taking care of people in other places, right? I mean, it's just
who cares about them?
Right, I know. It's just that story. That story was unbelievable.
But our people had voted early because we don't have Donald Trump saying that early voting is evil and then putting all the eggs on that election day basket, which I like it when it comes back and bites them.
Okay, so let me ask you a hard
Carrie,
question.
we have time for one more question. So you get the
Sorry, I've been babbling a little bit here,
oh
guys.
boy, really? Just one more? Okay, all right. Okay. Let me do something that I think will end us on a positive note. I just want to play. We queued up a spot of Gavin Newsom, who I'm sure you saw on Meet the Press, make a very good case for reelecting Biden when Kristen Welker, the Meet the Press host now, said, do you think it's irresponsible for Democrats to put Biden at the top of the ticket, given the concerns about his age? So let's play that. And then I'd love to hear you react to it because I thought it was so good.
Yep.
Do you think it's responsible for Democrats to put him at the top of the ticket, given those concerns?
Responsible. I revere his record. I mean, what he's done in 3 years has been a masterclass, close to 15 million jobs. That's 8 times more than the last 3 Republican presidents combined. The economy is booming. Inflation is cooling. It's 0.6% more than it was in the summer of 2020 at just 3.1%. Wait a second. We have American manufacturing coming back home, all because of Biden's wisdom, because of his temperance, his capacity to lead in a bipartisan manner, which is an underrepresented point. And so I have great confidence moving forward. So the answer is absolutely all in terms of the next 4 years.
I love Gavin. Marcos knows that Gavin and I are old buddies, and he's an avid Hopium Chronicles reader, and and this. No, listen. I think that this gets back to the Emperor Has No Clothes, the Wizard of Oz, the red wave that never came, the right-wing noise machine. That just so much of our daily discourse is just bullshit. That it's just stunning. I mean, things are, the base on this basic measure, are things better than when Biden came to office? Think about where things were in January 2021. The vaccines had not come. Hundreds of thousands of people had died unnecessarily because of Trump's mismanagement of COVID. We were in deep recession. The world economy was teetering. Washington, D.C., where I live, was, the capital was under military occupation because it had just been attacked. There had not been a peaceful transfer of power. The normal transition from one government to another didn't actually happen, right? The White House, the Biden people were coming in like literally cold with no transfer of power. And where we are today, right? I mean, today we're on the other side of COVID, which was the main promise that Joe Biden made to us. Our recovery here is stronger than any other advanced economy in the world. Inflation is lower here than any other advanced economy in the world. The stock market is breaking records. We have the lowest uninsured rate in American history. We have more new businesses being started every month than any time ever in American history by all various measures, right? Incredible sign of the health and vitality of the American economy. Real wages are increasing at a level that hasn't been seen in generations right now in this current period. Inflation's come way down, rents are coming down, right? Interest rates are coming down. I mean, everything. We are in one of the strongest economies in the history of the United States right now. And so, if Joe Biden came to us in 2020 and said, hey, we got real problems, I'm going to get us to the other side of these problems, he's met his fundamental promise to all of us. And that's why in the next few months, I assume, right, with the State of the Union coming next week, we're going to start to hear him laying out his second term agenda. And as I wrote in a piece in the New Republic a few weeks ago, my hope is that he says, look, you asked me to solve one, to get us to the other side of one really existential challenge last time. We got two more we got to take on together, which is countering climate change and making sure democracy prevails here and everywhere else around the world. I think it's going to be very possible for Joe Biden to really challenge us as a country to rise up and meet these enormous historic challenges, as we already are, right? But we have a lot of work to do. These are the challenges. Preserving democracy, countering climate change is really going to be the work of millennials and Gen Z, right? This is going to be the work in front of them. Those of us who are older, we had other things we had to do when we had our 25-year arc, right, of what our politics was going to look like in our lifetime. And so the battles that are in front of us are among the most consequential battles the country have ever faced. And I think we're up for it. I think our party's up for it. I think the country's up for it. I'm very optimistic about what we're going to be able to do together once we shake all the noise and the worry and the fear and the uncertainty and the doubt and just remind ourselves that Joe Biden's been a good president. The country's better off. The Democratic Party is strong and winning elections all across the country. And they got Trump, this guy who wears more makeup than a drag queen and who we're going to kick his ass in this election. We've been kicking their ass all over the country. We're going to do it again. And so I feel good. Look, we got a lot of work to do, but I would so much rather be us than them in every imaginable way.
Kerry, he's as good a surrogate for Biden as Gavin Newsom is. I just want to take a moment. The New York Times, just South Carolina, they called Biden's 96% victory a worrying sign about the intensity for his candidacy. But Donald Trump's 60% was a whopping, crushing
blowout,
historic blowout. This is why, sites like Daily Kos and Simon's work at Hopium Chronicles is really important. We're not, despite the joke name Hopium Chronicles, Simon is very data driven, very reality based, just like Daily Kos. And it is a clear-eyed view. It's partisan, yes, but it's clear-eyed about the challenges and the opportunities that we face. And that's why Simon's work is so critically important. And that's why I'm always so happy to have him on the show. And so glad that Hopium Chronicles is doing so well on Substack. Please, if you haven't already, check it out. Simon, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure.
Thank you both. And good luck with the leaf blower, Kerry.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck with the snow plows.
You guys, take care.
Bye-bye. Kerry, thank you so much for being my lovely co-host as always. Thanks to Walter for producing and everybody who helps behind the scenes, Paul and Perry. Thank you, the reader, viewer, listener, activist, for doing the work that you're doing to save our democracy from this very existential MAGA Trump threat. As you heard from Simon, we're in good shape, but we are in good shape because of people like you, because people that made 2 million calls in a House special election in the middle of February. Who does that? Really fired up Democratic liberal base. That's who does that. And that's why we're going to win in November. And so glad to have you guys along for the ride, going into battle together, because this is existential. Thank you so very much. Love you all from the bottom of my heart. Talk to you guys next week.